There we go. Morning, Jim. Morning, Julia. Welcome, everybody. Happy Mother's Day. Just Shozan Jack Hogner's here, so let me let him in. He's zooming in from Croatia, I believe. He lives in Vienna, but he's in Croatia for the weekend. Oh. Hello, hello.
Hi, good to meet you.
It's so nice to meet you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having
much
me.
for coming.
Oh yeah, of course, of course, of course. Yeah, I'm in Croatia. I'm in my girlfriend's uncle's country house. So I'm going to blame any lapses in logic or insight on the fact that I'm like suffering from serious travel fatigue right now. But it's kind of an interesting setting. It's
Yeah.
Oh,
going
wow.
from all there's yeah, anyways.
You're there for what was it, like a baptism or?
Yeah. It was a baptism. Yeah. So I was sitting there thinking about your Catholicism. Well, not, I mean, you were asking what religion I was raised in. I was raised in Catholicism. So I was thinking about those questions yesterday when I was in this old school Croatian religious ritual. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we'll get into
Yeah.
that.
Well, thank you again so much for coming.
Yeah.
I know you and I have communicated a little bit beforehand, and I shared the questions with you. So we'll just jump right in, shall we?
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the first question that I always ask in this series is, what did religion look like when you were growing up?
It looked like a lot what I went to yesterday, like an old school Catholicism. My mom was, I actually didn't get baptized until I was 2 years old. And I can either remember my baptism or I've got some strange false memory in there. But after I was baptized, my mom got very, very Catholic. So it was she like hewed her own homemade conservative Catholic path and sort of dragged us all along it. So we went to a Latin mass, and
Wow.
at the time that wasn't really kosher in the Catholic faith. So there wasn't an actual church where we could do this mass. So a lot of renegade conservative Catholics rented out a dance hall that was owned by the Milwaukee Mafia. And so we would clear out the chairs Sunday morning, and the Latin Mass priest would throw up an impromptu Latin Mass in this mafia owned dance hall. So it was very, very
Wow.
conservative. Yeah, my mom homeschooled, and she and my dad sort of, but my dad was always not on board. So
Mhm.
mostly it was my mom leading us along this Catholic path. Yeah, she homeschooled I was only homeschooled for 1 year, but my mom also sort of made a school and brought in some very Catholic teachers and some Catholic families, and so we did that. So it
Oh.
was, yeah, it was. I didn't take away any Catholicism, but the an intense pursuit of truth, religious truth, I definitely took that away from my mom and my
Mhm.
upbringing. Yeah.
Um, and you were raised in Wisconsin, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, can I assume that you being baptized at 2 rather than as a newborn baby, this was sort of a reflection of your mom's um becoming more religious?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yes, because I don't think she told me she and my dad just got divorced after 53 years of marriage, and so
Oh,
now
wow.
she's been hurled down this path of reflection, and part of it is thinking about how she became so Catholic, and she told me well, yeah, it wasn't she said she was very liberal until she was around until I was yeah, around 2 years old, and she said that the yeah, it was a natural health thing, and that brought her into conservative thought and made her very Catholic. I'm not exactly sure what the link is, but
That's
yeah,
really interesting, especially
yeah.
considering politics today. Yeah.
It's very weird. She was the woman, for better or worse, was really ahead of her time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And she sounds so entrepreneurial. Like, organizing this Latin mass, starting her own school.
She didn't organize it. There were a lot of crazy Catholic families in the Midwest at that time, and I think she just slotted in with them. But
Hmm.
she, yeah, she did start the school. She was, yeah, it's funny when you think about it. She was, she was very entrepreneurial in pushing very old-fashioned values, one of which is not women being entrepreneurial. So make of that what you will. Yeah,
Paradoxical, right?
right. Extremely.
How many siblings do you have?
I've got two brothers and three sisters.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
six in total.
Yeah, six in total. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And where do you fall?
I'm the second oldest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your younger siblings were homeschooled for a longer amount of time?
Yeah, they really got trapped in that whole thing. I was only in for a year and that was enough. But yeah, my younger, everybody else beneath me was homeschooled for longer than that. We had lived in Milwaukee type area, Brookfield, in between Brookfield and Madison, Milwaukee and Madison. And we moved to this more farm town. And that's when my mom really started homeschooling. So yeah.
Right. And you say you sort of got out after just a year. How did that work?
Because she didn't want to do us homeschooled for high school. So I
Okay,
got to so and that was my eighth grade. So I went to a high school then
got
in
it.
Brookfield. Yeah.
And so that's your mom. And then
Yeah.
was your dad pretty agnostic?
He's also very conservative.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's pretty agnostic. I mean, yeah, his
Yeah.
thing is that aliens probably impregnated apes, and that's what gave rise to this strange species of the human being. So that's his latest thing. As far as
Wow.
specific
For
religious
real?
affiliation, yeah, oh, yeah, well, yeah, yeah, yeah. He's trying to figure it all out, and he's like, I think probably it has something to do with aliens and apes made interbreeding. Yeah.
Wow.
So he didn't. Yeah, he didn't. He was raised Catholic in the 50s, and the stories that he tells seem to indicate that it was somewhat traumatizing,
Hmm.
but he also still is kind of trapped within that system. So his religion now is sort of anti-Catholic. That
Got
makes
it.
sense. And it's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, since you got so involved in Zen and spent so many years at Mount Baldy, and your parents seem at such different places, both from one another and from what you've committed your life to. I'm just curious, like, what religious conversations sound like in your family.
We don't have them so much anymore. Only if I bring them up. And then, my mom kind of just stopped. She did her best and then she gave up. So to be honest, it's really just her example is actually the only religious element in my relationship with her now. I mean,
Yeah.
occasionally I get curious about what she thinks about the new pope or
Hmm.
how she's taking in the current political situation in America from her Catholic point of view. But we don't talk about religion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We don't. Yeah. It's interesting. She's not interested. It's funny.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is she still practicing Catholic?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She's been on that path. It's one really consistent thing in her life. It's
Yeah.
a path. Before I used to think it was more of a imprisoning belief system,
Hmm.
but it's a path for her. So, and she
Hmm.
goes 3, 4 times a week to mass.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she embraces Vatican II now, I assume, or?
I mean, not really, no. I mean,
Mm.
she's old school. She likes the Latin Mass. She likes the conservative popes like Benedict and Pope John Paul II.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I told her she should come to Croatia because there's no Protestantism here, hardly at all. Like it was so shocking to me when I came here with my girlfriend and we're driving around, I'm
Mhm.
like, they're all Catholic churches. There's not a single box church here anywhere. So I was asking her, like, where is all the Protestantism? She says, well, sometimes it's in people's living rooms, but yeah, it's culturally Catholic country, and most people are culturally Catholic,
Yep.
which means they don't necessarily go to mass like everywhere else. But Catholicism is everywhere here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that when I've traveled in Eastern Europe as well. It's a
Yeah,
really marked contrast between
yeah,
Western and Eastern Europe. Yeah.
yeah. And America. Yeah, it blows my mind when I go to America, these brand new box churches.
They're
I mean, I don't
huge.
want to call them box churches, but they're these huge, huge institutions,
You
evangelical.
that's an interesting thing to notice. Do you notice it more? I don't know how much you travel in the US nowadays, but do you notice it more in the Midwest than say on the coasts?
I don't travel to the coasts, so I
Yeah.
just see it in the Midwest. I see these, yeah, these big, huge, and it's like they're like almost like franchises in the
Yes.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. They're yeah, it's a certain I think it's called New Life or something.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
from
They're everywhere.
Ohio
Okay.
originally, and
Yeah,
similar,
yeah.
demographics and similar mega church. Like the church that I went to with my parents, they're really not around anymore. It's
Oh,
all been
interesting.
replaced by the big jumbo screens and the hallelujahs. Yeah.
Gosh, it's kind of like what's happened to every institution in America. It's been bought out by larger concerns and
Mhm.
consolidated, and it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting for sure because it's like there's on the one hand, I try not to judge it so much and be like, well, there's a community there and I'm glad that my mother is going and she's making friends and all that. But then when you sit and listen to some of the things they're talking about, it's really
Yeah,
hurtful and far from inclusive and like
yeah.
really uncomfortable language in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't been to
Yeah.
any kind of mass like that, or a Catholic mass. But yeah, I know it's hard to not be judgy as a Zen person because you're like, what?
Yeah, right.
What are you
Yeah.
saying? Really? Really, guys? Really? That, yeah. So it's like I have to get, especially when I'm with my mom, I have to get that out of my head. It's
Yeah.
not helpful. Yeah.
Mm. Um, the next question is, and for you to make of this what you will, what do you appreciate the most about the religion you were born into?
Yeah, I was thinking about that one too. I really appreciate being born into a religion,
Hmm.
and having my mom just care about something and
Hmm.
be so committed that she was willing to homeschool us, willing to start her own Catholic schools, hire her own teachers, like sift through the books and make sure to deliver us the least helpful, most conservative and outdated conservative Catholic books, and find the most conservative Catholic outdated teachers and but she cared enough to do that. She was
Yeah.
indicating that this is important, that there are stakes, that you don't have to just follow what everyone around you is doing. Uh,
Hmm.
Mainstream. She's really outside of the mainstream, and she really had to she cared. She
Yeah.
cared, she got that across. And I think it got into every one of her children and made us all pretty immediately, once we reached the age of reason, move outside of that tradition she had raised us in. But that energy, I think, was still there to care about, um, I don't know about religion, but I guess maybe spiritual truth. That's what she was trying to get across. She just had very rote ways of doing it. These are the commandments. This is, Sunday school. This is the truth through the Catholic Church. So it wasn't so much her, obviously the specifics, but um, the authenticity of her
Yeah.
pursuit and her path. Yeah.
Were her parents Catholic?
No,
Or-
I mean, I think they were. I think they were Catholic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because we talked about this. Yeah, her mom's parents were Lutheran. But then
Mhm.
her mom converted to Catholicism when she married her husband, but they weren't serious. They were like, yeah, they weren't serious. They weren't like my mom.
Like Christmas Catholics or something.
Christmas Catholics. I never heard that, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So your mom was really driven to
Yeah.
like forge her own way.
I guess. Yeah. Maybe it was, yeah, being married to my dad, who was kind of checked out a lot of the time. She had to find something, but yeah. Yeah, I appreciate
That's
that. I appreciate
interesting.
being given prayer. I
Hmm.
still pray. I just say that help prayer. I just say help, but I say it a lot.
Yes.
I don't say
I
my Our
know
Fathers, but
I've heard you talk really beautifully about that on your on Patreon. Could you share just in a nutshell with this group what you mean about the help prayer?
I mean, yeah, it's really a homemade kind of thing. I mean, when I was at Mount Baldy, which was just one struggle after another, I would actually actually pray, maybe as an act of rebellion or just instinct or something. But since then, um, and maybe it's something like what the Christian centering prayer is through Father Keating, but I never studied that or anything. But you know, I mean, in a moment when I'm finding myself in life getting sort of spun out or anxious, or if I'm just feeling grateful or anxious or despairing, like if I catch some of these things coming up, I'll just, hold that zazen posture, which we learn how to do. I mean, just not, making a scene anywhere, but just straightening my back and just doing that breath a little bit and then just saying that help prayer, just throwing it out there. Yeah, and that's it. It's just putting myself into that, just putting myself into that word. I think it's a way of humbling myself, like, okay, this is a bit, I'm experiencing overwhelm. I'm
Mhm,
acknowledging it and just putting that energy into that word.
mhm.
It's been helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It reminds me of koan work in some ways, like working with mu,
actually a good point. How do you mean?
like, I think of mu as like both the question and the engine
All right.
operating at the same time, and putting your whole body into it, that whatever, I mean, it's a little different because with mu it's like whatever's coming up just gets pushed into mu, right? It's like whether it's ambivalence or pain or exhaustion or sorrow or whatever, it just becomes like fuel for mu, right? It just
Yeah,
all
yeah,
goes in and all goes in and all goes in. And then after exerting effort, it just kind of like the fire catches and it just mu is just doing itself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And maybe
Yeah,
that part of it, that
yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah. I actually never linked moo and help, but there's a connection. Yeah. I don't think I would do that without having done koan practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the one word, right, where you're just like,
Yeah,
this is it.
this is it.
Um, so what do you discard or no longer carry from this conservative Catholicism, trailblazing upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, most of it. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
but it's a good question. I mean, I don't know. It's funny. When I was watching the two movies with my mom, Conclave and the Two Popes, and
Yes.
it's a reminder of just how much that religion is institutionalized. Um, I
Hmm.
remember when I was in college I had a really good theology professor. He's a young guy, and I was asking him, like, okay, what are the rules? Like, what are the rules around like sex? Because I know that's a big thing in this religion. So, what can I do? And he was honest. He didn't really have an answer. Um, and then we were studying Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, and
Hmm.
it was a classic education. I studied philosophy, and we went from like the pre-Socratics through Plato and Aristotle, through the medieval philosophers, through the Enlightenment philosophers, all the way up to the doorstep of postmodernism, and then we stopped there. So you get this whole sweep of
Yeah, well,
philosophy, and they
yeah.
focused on like Thomas Aquinas. The whole education was focused on Thomas Aquinas, and I remember reading him and talking to this priest and getting a sense from him that the rules weren't that clear on this very important topic. And it was arbitrary. You talk to a different person, you're going to get a different idea of what's acceptable and what's not. Um, and then you study Thomas Aquinas and you get a sense I mean, I got a sense for the structure of the belief system, but it was at that point where I found myself thinking, I'm not a Catholic. It's not that I really reject it. It's like, I'm just not this.
Hmm.
And it's not as
Hmm.
clear as I thought. So for me to be a Catholic, that means I just got to kind of go along with whatever priest I find decide to kind of obey and not really think too hard. And that idea of God is out there and you're praying and you're praying and you're praying and you're praying to this figure that's outside of you. I think ultimately it was just like this is just not working. I'm just not this. So yeah, it didn't fit my needs.
Mhm.
So then I was like, okay, well, yeah, then it was time to look around.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
struck by what a different conversation that may have been from the the internalized conversation of growing up with your mom, where it seems like that was very much like these are kind of the rules, even if
Yeah.
she was making it up as she, or not
Yeah, yeah,
making it
yeah.
up, but you know what I mean, like sort of
Yeah.
figuring it out, but like
Yeah.
they're very clear rules.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, and then I found out the rules aren't so clear. You just kind of got to pretend they are.
Yeah.
You know, if you really get down to it, even in Catholicism, they're not that clear. One day you're going to purgatory, the other day purgatory is gone, you know, and you realize it's just a bunch of guys in funny hats making stuff up. I mean, that's the uncharitable interpretation, but
Yes.
that was what I thought in college, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did you go to a Catholic or a religious university?
Yeah, yeah, it was a Catholic university with a great
Hmm.
books program. So I studied philosophy there. It was
Hmm.
University of Dallas in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Dallas, Texas, and
Yeah.
Catholic University. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so now comes the fun question. Now that you've led us up to where you're like, okay, this isn't working. This
Right.
God, this worshiping to God, something external doesn't fit, doesn't feel um like it works for you. So then how did you, the next question is describe how you came to Buddhism and to Zen practice in particular.
Yeah, I mean, so I moved to Hollywood because I always wanted to be a writer, so I was going to go write movies. And I spent a lot of time driving around in my bad car. I mean, this is back in the 90s, so there was no internet, like free internet.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would listen to the radio and the KPFK was like this independent, this good, cool, independent station. And it would be these Alan Watts lectures. And I mean,
Huh.
Alan Watts is like, you know how it is when you first discovers different ways of thinking. I mean, kids probably discover this stuff right away now. Alan Watts is everywhere, but it was really new for me, Alan
Yeah.
Watts. So I just drive around and listen to these lectures. And Joseph Campbell, I was reading The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and so I got
Mhm.
exposed to Buddhist thought for the first time. I mean, I did 4 years of philosophy in college, and we had zero Eastern thought. It was totally foreign to me. I mean, Heraclitus, everything is fire. Was it Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, that said everything is change and you never step into the same water twice? I think that might have been him. That was literally it. And I remember hearing that thinking, oh, and I remember I had a wonderful Shakespeare professor and his wife was Buddhist and he just asked me one question once, and I can't remember what it was, and just stopped my mind that it was a Buddhist type question about death. And that was
Mm.
literally the only exposure I had. But then, of course, when I went to California, Buddhism is everywhere. So I was reading Joseph Campbell, and then I was listening to Alan Watts, and then one day it was like right at the start of Google, I Googled Buddhism in near me, you know, and I
Mhm.
found Lama Oli Nidal. Do you know that guy?
No.
Diamond Way Buddhism. It's really funny because now
Oh,
I live in Vienna and he's right down the street from me. He's
is that
very
right?
controversial, and maybe I don't want to go into that, but I enjoyed the people that introduced me to Buddhism, and you know, it was a lot of like my memory is it's like concentrating on the chakras, and it doesn't seem very Buddhist now when I think about it, but I would hang out with some of the people in that group afterwards, and again, it was like, oh my gosh, this Buddhism is. You know how that is like when you, holy cow, you just keep getting doors opened and having these
Yes.
insights like no self. What do you mean? You know,
Yes.
Dharmakaya. What do you mean? What are you kidding? Oh, you. I mean, I was taught to pray as a Catholic, but just the words. But then you're positioned as a meditator, and you know, you learn how to sit just to learn how to sit. You know, and
Yes.
my. So, anyways, so then I went to the Sham. I gave up on that group because actually it was kind of strange. Like I went to this lecture with Lama Oli Nidal, you know,
Uh-huh.
and all he did for an hour and a half was talk about how there was going to be a terrorist attack from fundamentalist Muslims in America, and we need to take this problem seriously. This was 2000, and I remember thinking like,
Wow.
wait, what is he talking about? I don't want to get lectured by some like guy who seems to be slightly obsessed on this particular topic, so I'm out of here. I mean, he was somewhat prescient, and I later found out this is he's kind of controversial for that reason, I think. But so I went from him to the Shambhala group,
Mm.
and I studied with them in California, in Los Angeles, for like 4 years.
Hmm.
They were great because it was like two guys, two Hollywood. It was like, yeah, two Hollywood. One of them, I think, was like an aspiring screenwriter, and one of them wrote jingles for TV shows, and they were like this comedy duo that would give these classes on Buddhism like once a week. And it was just like taking, you know, I don't yet just how to apply Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana teachings to everyday life. And it was, again, it was totally revolutionary to me. It was a lifesaver
Yeah.
living in Los Angeles where you have nothing.
Right.
These guys are really helpful. And then one day I was sitting there and I was looking at like there's like a lot of prayer flags and there's a lot of incense. And actually we were doing a 1 day sit and there was an Akarya there and she was very rude. And I thought, all right, I'm out of here. Then I found my mentor who led me to my teacher and led me to Mount Baldy and everything in Zen. So yeah, and then Zen was just like simple and clean. And I met this monk. Yeah, and he was very different. He was wearing these old, ratty, lived-in robes, and he was doing a sitting class, and it was like in a parking garage off Hollywood Boulevard, and he just made the space just totally special, and it was a
Huh.
completely not special space, and he was a different level than these other people I'd met. You could
Hmm.
really tell it was all the way sunk all the way through and out the other side of him, all this training.
Hmm.
So we became really good friends. And
This is the man who became your mentor, or this was
yeah,
someone your mentor introduced you to?
no, this was my mentor eventually introduced me to his teacher, who was Joshu Sasaki Roshi, but my
Okay.
mentor was a priest at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the mentor was the priest in the parking garage.
Yeah. And that's where
Oh,
there was like a community room in a parking garage off of Sunset Boulevard. It sounds strange when yeah,
yeah.
but
Okay.
it's just like this bad concrete room, but somehow he'd lay out cushions in there and we would sit.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
It was really,
amazing.
it was amazing. And he was really helpful. Boy, to have someone like meet your questions and meet your despair and meet your
Yeah.
anxiety. Oh my gosh. What a gift. Yeah. So that was it for me. Here I am, 25 years later,
Yeah.
practicing.
Can I go back a bit and
Yeah.
ask you a question about moving to Hollywood?
Yeah.
So that seems so brave
Yeah.
to get in your car and go off to Hollywood and be like, I'm going to be a writer, man. So
Yeah.
can you
Stupid.
tell us
But it
just a
was.
little bit about how that came to be for you?
Yeah, I never think anything through. So it was like the final 3 weeks of college, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta do something. And I wanted to be a writer, and Pulp Fiction had just come out, and I really liked it. So I was like, I'm gonna write screenplays. So, and then I was literally just gonna drive there. I had a girlfriend at the time, and she was gonna come out there too. And although I didn't know that at the time, but yeah, I just do things off the top of my head, really, really important decisions. And this was one of them. And it worked out because my roommate at the time had a brother in Redondo Beach, and he was like, "Yeah, I need a roommate. You can come live here." And
Oh, great.
I found a job at this old bookstore run by these sort of crazy hippies that it's a wonderful bookstore called Either Or Bookstore, and they didn't allow any electronics of any kind, including calculators, because they were so paranoid that the FBI and CIA were spying on them, even through calculators. So you had to hand add everything on little pads of paper in this bookstore. So yeah, I lived with my friend's brother, and I worked at the bookstore, and eventually moved to Hollywood and kind of got some jobs in the industry.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, I mean yeah, it was at one point when I realized like best case scenario, I don't want this life. So what do I do now? And that coincided right with me meeting my Zen mentor. And then I worked with him for like 2 years. And then one day it was like, something clicked, and it was another one of these, all right, I'm off to the monastery, I guess. It was literally in about 2 seconds, I figured out what was going to happen. I was going to move up there for at least 3 years, is what I thought. And my mentor is going to move out of the Zen temple where he's living, and he's going to take over my rent control department. It just like all clicked in one moment. And in the
Wow.
earlier, it was not that I had not ever had that idea. So yeah.
Wow. So just based on this conversation, you were like, I'm going to go do my 1,000-day training
Uh yeah, well, because we had
in a
been
couple of years.
a couple of years. Yeah, it was really building. It was so helpful to be able to find someone that I really clicked with.
Yeah.
Um, and that was wise. I'd never met anybody wise before, ever in my life. I'd never met anybody wise.
Hmm.
You know, flawed
Yeah.
for sure, but wise. I had a lot of philosophy professors, but they're always feeding you somebody else's ideas,
Hmm.
you know. And then the other Buddhist teachers that I had were faithfully relaying what passing something on that they had learned from somebody else, but he was sharing what he knew
Hmm. Oh,
himself.
that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was different.
So rather than conveying the teaching handed down, which obviously you're not saying that's not important, but
Yeah.
you were learning, and it sounds like very inspired by him talking about his own personal experience.
Yeah, and also me asking him questions and him
Mm-hmm.
meeting those questions with his personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's just nothing else to be said after that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I have to, and then I have to, then it's for up to me to reflect on it and absorb it and process it. And,
Yeah.
and there's limitations in that too, right? Like
Sure.
you see how the person is limited, and then you're like, oh, I gotta fill in now. And now you're no longer learning, you're doing the practice, I think. That's how
Yeah.
it was for me, anyways. And then it was like with him, it was like, I got to go do this with his teacher.
Mm-hmm. And until that time, had you met
No,
Sasaki Roshi?
no, no. I'd seen like maybe one or two Tay shows, and it was just nonsense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's lots of bells and incense, a lot of very tired looking people with shaved heads. It was looked like I don't want to be part of this,
Who
but
can resist,
who
right?
can resist? Yeah, just about everybody on planet
Yeah,
Earth.
right.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a story I heard. I spent some time training at Daibosatsu Monastery,
Okay.
and I remember getting to know some of the monks there. And, it's like a nest of vipers, man. They were like always
Yeah.
gossiping about each other. And I remember one time one of the monks pulling me aside and said, "Oh, you see that guy over there? You know what happened to him? The day before he was going to be ordained, people found him like with his bag, tiptoeing out of the monastery to a cab
That's awesome.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
back to New York."
We had that too. Or we had the tiptoeing out of the monastery after they got ordained.
Right.
That
Right.
was
I
usually
think
what
this guy
happened.
did that too, because he came back and then
Yeah, yeah,
more
yeah.
fleeing ensued. Yeah, but
Yeah.
gosh. Um, I'm going to flip the questions around a little bit because it feels like this is a better order. The next question is, what drew you to a monastic life there at Mount Baldy?
I don't know. So I did my first retreat and I wasn't even sitting. So there you go. I mean, and I
Hmm.
did my first Dai Session. Uh,
Wow, that must have
and
been
yeah, it was crazy. But
memorable.
it's something clicked because it was like, I am never gonna get this just by talk. Yeah, that was fortunate because I was a philosopher, I was an overthinker, a writer, blah, blah, blah. And
Hmm.
then I was like I said, I was talking to my mentor for like 2 years, and he's crazy. And he's got this crazy theory that mixes Zen with quantum physics. I mean, crazy in the best way.
Hmm.
He's awesome. And
Yeah.
and so we were trying to write this book together, mixing, and I realized at one point, I was trying to learn the quantum physics that he was talking about, but then I realized at one point, oh, it's not the quantum physics that I don't get, it's the Zen. And then I realized I'm never going to get, and it just hit me one day, and when I was in the library trying to research the stuff that he was talking about in quantum physics, it hit me like I will never understand this intellectually ever. The kalpas, the silk scarf, and the birds going over the mountain, infinite mountain, like until it wipes away the mountain. Like I will never
Mhm.
learn this intellectually.
Yeah.
And then I had this feeling like, oh, you have to receive it in your body. You have to receive it in your body. And then I was like, I got to train my somehow with my body. And then right after that, I found out about the retreat. And that was when I realized, oh, I'm going to do this retreat, then I'm going to move to the monastery. So I did go and do the retreat. And that was really kind of the first time I sat. I mean, I did sit with my mentor, but I just was just squirming on my cushion. It was
Mhm.
nothing going and no zazen until the in click happened where this was going to happen through practice, not through, I was never going to get it up here. This is not the right equipment.
Mhm.
Maybe with somebody, a more high IQ individual could. But actually, it's funny because I've run into those individuals later on, and they always make the worst Zen students because they do get it up here. Um,
Mhm.
so then I did the week retreat, and it was totally like amazing.
Mm.
You know how that is. There's a lot
Yes.
of, yeah, you're like walking around like sunshine, leaves, flowers, traffic. You're enlightened, you know. So okay,
Everything is a gateway. Yes,
everything is, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. I always call that the honeymoon period.
Right,
If
right.
it wasn't for that, why would people keep doing it, right? It's
Or
like you
exact.
fall
Yeah,
in
that's a good.
love.
If you fall in love, that's what it is. You fall in love. You fall in love. Yeah. You fall with your teacher, the people, the practice, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
deep. Yeah. And powerful.
So you went up for a week.
Yeah, we did a Dai session. I did a Dai session,
Yeah.
which took, yeah,
Oh,
7 day
yeah.
retreat.
And then what made you decide to do the 3 years?
I don't know. That was just what popped in my head. I'll do it for 3 years. Yeah. So, and it's funny because in my 3 years in, I got really sick, and then I had to decide if I was going to stay, and I had to quit for like 3 months, and then I went
Mhm.
back, and but yeah, it was just a number in my head. It was just a usually after a year you would get ordained.
Mhm.
I mean, my teacher was really kind of like, he didn't want people gathering dust, so he was always pushing, 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 and so if you weren't going to be able to stay, you had to keep committing more and more and more.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know you've talked and written about that really beautifully as well. Can you tell us a little bit? I don't know if anyone here has ever been to Mount Baldy, but can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like? How many people were there? Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, so it was an old Boy Scout camp. About
Oh,
it. So if you
right.
get on the 10 so the 10 freeway dead ends in the Pacific Ocean,
Mm.
and then it's a straight line into the desert. I don't know for how long it goes, but if you travel from the Pacific Ocean to Mount Baldy straight east on the 10, it's like an hour and a half, right? So it's like an hour from Los Angeles.
Okay.
It's in the San Bernardino Mountains,
Hmm.
maybe like what was it, 6,500 feet elevation.
Mm.
Um, it's just weird. There's a little weird little village there, and it's kind of like this land that time forgot. It's a little village that time forgot,
Hmm.
like the 50s, And then you go up a little bit higher up the mountain, and there's this very old Boy Scout camp. Um, and before that, it was a special forces camp for like World War II, and then in the 50s, 60s, it was a Boy Scout camp. So somehow my teacher and his hippie students found this in the 60s, and they turned it into this makeshift monastery. So it's on public forest land, and you can't change the character of the building. So you really can't change anything. So we were always stuck with these horrible old wooden shacks. There's like 21 buildings.
Wow.
Um, so it was a monastic style practice, but it's technically not a monastery because women cannot practice in monasteries in Japan. And that was my teacher's lineage.
Mhm.
So he was, a long story, but he was sent here because someone in America mailed a letter to Myoshinji, the temple complex in Kyoto, saying, we want a Roshi. And so they sent this troublemaker to America to get rid of him, basically. That's the story.
Not
And
the only one. Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, so they sent him here, and yeah, he found this Boy Scout camp and set up this monastic style training center. So it technically wasn't a monastery, which I think is kind of important.
Yeah.
When I went to Japan, I learned what a monastery is. It's a
Hmm.
it's a training center in a lineage that kind of has its roots in that country. We don't I don't know that we have that in
Yep.
America so much. We definitely I mean we did train like monks, but there was so much and we brought all this he brought all those traditions and those rituals and so we would do a winter training period and a summer training period. And so we would do one set Dai session, I think it was a month, um,
Mhm.
one or two a month. So one 7 day intensive retreat, which was basically sitting, koan practice, eating, chanting, and Teisho Zen lecture. That's all we did. So it was 3 in the morning until like 9:30 at night was some
Mm.
one of version of those things. We even did like formal showers. So everything was very structured. Uh,
Mhm.
every aspect of the day was structured, like
Yeah.
deeply structured, So you're joining this body of practitioners and you're kind of exhausted because you're waking up at 3 in the morning and and you learn the form, you learn this practice, you learn to bow when you enter the Zendo and how to walk and how to sit and
Mhm.
what to you can and cannot do in the Zendo. And then you're doing walking meditation and koan practice, and you're just following this flow of practice. And so the whole 3 month training period would be some version of would be a looser version of what the digestion was. So we do more samu or work practice, which would
Yep.
basically be painting, cleaning, shoveling, um,
Yeah.
cooking, that sort of thing. So really simple lifestyle. Every aspect of the day was supposed to be practice, which was a beautiful lesson. There was not anything to be accomplished, which is one reason why it was kind of such a shit show at the monasteries because what was important was how you were doing things, not what you were doing. So,
Yeah.
which was great. You could finally release that part of yourself that was goal oriented and
Yeah.
do things for their own sake. And yeah,
How many people were up there with
I
you?
mean, never many, never many. I mean, nobody wanted to do this. I mean, sometimes for the retreats, there were a lot of people that would come in from over the years who had trained there. So there were all these different generations of monks and nuns and students, the really old school, like, you know, hardcore 70s students, and then you had the more civilized 80s students. Then you had the real um, uh, alpha um, monks from the 90s. And so you had all these different generations of people coming through for the retreats. But mostly when I was there were, maybe 5 to 8 people,
Mhm.
sometimes maybe 15 or something. And
Yeah.
then during the off season, Seikon, which was spring and fall, my teacher would go to other Zen centers and all the monks would be left amongst each other. So we'd rent out the facilities and we would support other people's practice. We would cook for them and clean for them. And we would
Mhm.
do a skeletal practice ourselves. And then it would maybe just sometimes be 3 to 5 people. During the training period, there's usually more on camp, but it varied, maybe 8, maybe 10, sometimes maybe just a few, but
Yeah. Yeah.
never many, never. It was always really small. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like Harada Roshi's group. So he's a trainer in the Rinzai Zen tradition now, and he
Yeah.
gets like 80 people at his sessions or so. He's like really
Oh,
thrive.
man.
We're
Yeah.
never thriving.
Um, the next question is, what advice would you give to people curious about pursuing a monastic or, like, I get your point about it's not really a monastery, so like a more intensive practice. You have any advice?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, people do ask me, like, I was talking to a guy not too long ago.
Mm,
I was talking to this guy became a patron just so he could talk to me about how his son like
mm,
ran away from UCLA to join a monastery and he's just wringing his hair. Um,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't give any advice. Like if somebody's, it's like they say about writing. If someone asks you what advice you would give a young writer, it's like advise them not to write, and if they're meant to do it, they'll ignore you. It's kind of
Mm,
similar. But it's great to do a really, really intensive period of training. It was for me. It was great for me to do it and to buy into it and to learn every last useless ritual and to take it seriously, like exactly how I don't know. When I look back at it now, I don't know how I was so sincere about it.
Mhm.
Maybe it was just I
I
was
know
caught up.
exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
right.
Yeah,
Like
I know exactly. Yeah.
I didn't have an ounce of cynicism or sarcasm about it. And I'm a very cynical and sarcastic person, but I mean, I think it was my teacher. He was so sincere. For me, my experience of him and of my fellow priests, and they also had a
Mhm.
great sense of humor. And so, doing this practice, like exactly how you hold your hands when you're doing
Yes.
gash, exactly where you put the candles on the butsudan, exactly
Mhm.
how you sit in the zendo and how you correct people as the jikijitsu and how you pour tea as the shoji. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, doing these learning the life of a monk was beautiful for me. And
Mhm.
I always say that the two most important things I ever did were going to the monastery and leaving the monastery and not necessarily in that order.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing is I did you don't need it. That's the funny thing. You don't need it. You
Right.
don't have to. I didn't know that at the time. I thought you really did have to go to a monastery to learn this practice, but you really don't.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay. I have so many follow-up questions, but I'm going to stick to my script so that we have a little time for people's questions, and then we
Good.
can let you out of here on time.
Good.
Um, the last question I always ask, oh, but I skipped one. So let me go back. So the other question is, how do you integrate the religion you were born with and from your childhood with Zen practice today, if at
I
all?
don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. That's one when I was thinking about it that I don't quite know how to answer. I think about all these guys that I used to train with, like they were so serious, these priests, and they were Jewish, right? And then the older they got, the more they just started going to temple again and
Mhm.
and identifying um as Jewish. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of like as I get older, I realize my identity is like Midwestern Catholic. Like I love the pomp and
Mhm.
circumstance of the mass. I love the
Mhm.
influence of the church on like great literature
Mhm.
and art.
Mhm.
Pieta is by my lights the greatest piece of
Mhm.
sculpture, trying to capture. So I'm a writer, so I write. I think I don't write haiku. I don't like Zen art. I don't like Zen calligraphy. I think about Dante's Inferno. I mean, I love AQ. I
Mhm.
do love and Hakuin's writings and
Sure.
calligraphy. But I think that Catholicism is in my blood. The color, the ritual, the
Yeah.
drama of the Catholic Mass, all that stuff I think is in me. And the
Yeah.
prayer, just praying. And the Sacred Heart of Jesus is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But Jesus is like the ultimate bodhisattva example.
Mhm.
That dirty hippie from Galilee is the ultimate bodhisattva. So I think I carry that around. And it really is there's so
Mhm.
much color in the Catholicism. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful for it now to have
Yeah.
that color to fill out Catholic color to fill out the black and white calligraphy of Zen.
Oh,
Heart,
that's a
so much heart.
beautiful way to
Yeah.
integrate everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in many ways like the reason that launched this conversation series is, so much of Zen practice is silent. And I realized one day talking to some members of the precepts class that you can talk and talk and talk for years off the cushion and not really know where people come from religiously,
That's
or
interesting.
how it how someone's religious faith and practice and daily mm, routines around religion evolve over time,
Yeah.
because we spend so much time quietly being religious.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um Thank you for that. All right, very last question. What 3 books would you recommend to others?
Oh yeah, I was thinking about that. Who are they? Who are these people I'm recommending books to? This is a very important question. We have to get the context right.
Well, you've got, I mean, this is a big crowd. You've got Barry Magid here, you've got Ruth Ozeki here, and
Oh
you've got
wow.
a bunch of members of our Sangha uh, who are artists and musicians and
Now
singers.
I'm intimidated. Yeah. I've been trying to reread I don't know. I've read so much lately because I'm working on a novel, and so it's
Mm,
taking nothing short of eternity. And so I've been just been reading novel. All I've been reading is fiction. All I've been
yeah,
reading is fiction.
that's great.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And so I've been, and so I finally sat down to read Anna Karenina for the first time. It's a big book, and it's a rich book. It's
Sure.
orders of magnitude greater than any other novel that I've ever read, but it really requires my attention.
Mhm.
I always try and like when I was talking to my niece about this, I always like there's a reason there are certain books that are just classics. And I think there's a reason this book is. I recommend that book. I mean,
Yes.
for me, it's always about Anna Karenina and her journey and her passion. But there's also like this other, and I haven't read it actually. I've been trying to reread it, but the print is too small. So when I came back to America recently, I went to Half Price Books and I was trying to find a larger print version and I couldn't. So I'm trying to reread it. But my memory of when I read it a few years ago was being just totally swept away by Levin, um, who's a character who's sort of juxtaposed to Anna Karenina, and I forget when it is. It's the like the penultimate chapter, I think, when he has something that looks like an opening. Um, it's like an enlightenment experience.
Hmm.
And all along, Tolstoy seems to be has been like juxtaposing these two different ways of living, and he's never judging. Apparently, he really wanted to judge. So apparently, in early drafts, he made Anna Karenina mean and ugly and adulterous. But then he kind of was like working with her, and he fell in love with that character, and he made her beautiful and passionate and tragic. But juxtaposed to that is this character who's stubborn and sincere, and
Hmm.
he lives his stubborn, sincere life out on his farm and has something like an enlightenment experience. So I recommend that book.
Yeah.
And also the short story, Father Sergius.
Oh, yes.
I am telling you, that is, which is also Tolstoy. I have never read a better description of the monk's life from beginning to end. It's amazing. It's amazing. He's amazing, Tolstoy.
Yeah, he is. I was an
Yeah.
English major, so
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love both of those. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and of course for Zen people, it's always like the classics like Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I really like
Hmm.
Pema Chodron and Trungpa isn't sort of out of fashion now, but I really clicked with his stuff.
Hmm. Like the
It's very
spiritual materialism kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that one. Yeah, that's a great book. And I liked his book on Zen, The Teacup and the Skull Cup. The first like few
Hmm.
chapters of that, he he does this fantastic, withering, devastating deconstruction of Zen practice. It's
Hmm.
savage. And he says, "You're the teacup." And he talks about how Zen guys just Zen people get all their little and they learn the bows and everything's perfect. And you go back to their room and it's a total mess. And he said that's the Zen path. But the skull cup path is taking it, which was the Vajrayana path, the tantric path, is taking it into the world and turning the world into your Zendo, so to speak, in your practice. It's really that first chapter I thought was yeah, devastated me when I read that as a monk.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it too when like different Buddhists will like tear apart each other
Yeah.
and be like, you guys are full of it. You don't know what the fuck
Right.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. Those internecine struggles, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Little propaganda thrown in doesn't hurt.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, Thank you so, so much. This is all the questions I have, but I want to leave some time for people to unmute themselves and share any comments or questions or anything else you want to say to our special guest.
Well, I'll say thank you. It's nice to meet you and hear you in person.
Oh, thank you, Barry.
hear this journey. You said the two most important things were joining the monastery and leaving the monastery, but you didn't say
Yeah.
anything about leaving and why you left.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, I left because that's a long story, which I'm always sharing this stuff in my videos. We had, of course, this huge explosion at our Zen Center, long overdue at the end of my stay there. My teacher's decades of sexual misconduct and all those allegations finally exploded to the surface right at the end of his life. And it impacted our community, which kind of collapsed. Um, and I was writing about it. I just decided to write about it. The writer was how I was processing it. And I knew that writing in the way I was writing, it wasn't appropriate for me to stay. And it was going to be a problem. I mean, I could have if I had wanted to. My teacher had said, okay, you're now the abbot of Mount Baldy. You stay, you do this. But I didn't know what that meant. Was I supposed to stay there and keep wearing my robes and chanting in Sino-Japanese and doing tea ceremonies and pretending that I can train young men in this practice? You know, so it became time for me to leave, and I was really done, you know. I mean, I wouldn't say I was disillusioned. I was just ready to leave a burning house, you know. And it was great. I'm grateful that I mean, it's complicated, but it couldn't have. It worked out the way it had to, and I'm happy that it worked out that way. If it had worked out differently, I would probably still be more stuck in the tradition and my teacher's way of teaching and a lot of his problematic um, I don't know how to put it, energies or habits, or I would still just be stuck in all that. I'd be cosplaying the Rinzai Zen monk. So I was happy to move completely out of that and not have it at my back. I'm not officially connected to those people anymore. So I can just say whatever I want. And if it's bogus, people will tell me, and they do. And if it connects with people, then it does. And I'm not beholden to, I mean, if I was still in that organization, every stupid video I made, people would from my previous organization would rightly be emailing me and correcting me and in my head when I'm shooting those videos. So I'm happy now that I'm free of that. But it was very, very painful and bad how that all went down at my former community.
How did you end up thinking about that form of training and that form of life and your teacher's character?
I mean, I love my teacher. I love him to death. I mean, it's funny, like I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I was a mess. I was lost when I met him. I was trapped in myself and I was gonna self-destruct.
Yeah.
I didn't know, and he showed me a way out of that. He really did, and it was unconditional love. And his character was, you know, I there were things I didn't show him because I knew if I got a little bit too close or a little bit too dependent, it was going to be a disaster. So he had a I don't know how to put it. He had a barbaric side to him.
Mm,
It was too tough. He was too much. It
yeah.
was too hard, you know? And, I mean, I don't know what to say about his whole sexual misconduct. I mean, that was what it was, and it was not good. And that was part of his character too. So,
Mhm.
and that's him. I can't speak to, he didn't do that to me, but it's part of my experience of him, where other people coming up to me and telling me things, especially after so I wound up being like having fully participated in that strict Rinzai Zen style and then seeing it all fall apart and then moving on and not really ever feeling the desire to go back and keep training in that way, you know. So I wound up feeling about it kind of like it's just behind me.
Yeah, I guess I've personally been very obsessed with this problem of how that kind of training can be so transformative of character in one ways and completely dissociated from other aspects of character in other ways.
Okay,
And
what's your answer to that? Because you're a psychologist. Like, what's your take on that?
well, I think that in fact, a lot of this training is training in dissociation.
How so?
That it's sort of learning a kind of intensity that doesn't ever get focused on those vulnerabilities that give rise to problems. I mean, at one point you said how important it was, like your mentor, to just sort of see your anxiety, see your weakness, and I think that that gets lost, I think, in a lot of training. And I think that
Yeah.
uh, it's hard to figure out how to create a psychologically minded practice that doesn't just say be completely wholehearted in your work and your samadhi and your sitting, but we're never going to talk about childhood trauma or what that's done to you, or your
Yeah.
sexuality, or your
Yeah.
depression, or your anxiety. Somehow, you don't bring that into Dokusan, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I mean, somebody told me once that in our lineage, it's supposed they're the Zen masters, and they are who they are, and they teach by Zen. I mean, he really did teach this boundaries are arbitrary. He really, and there was a freedom in that. But then I was told that there's supposed to be a whole priest structure in place to keep the teacher from
Uh,
misbehaving to keep him in line. But I mean, that just doesn't happen. At least in our community, it didn't happen. I think it maybe happens more in Japan where I visited. And there's a really, you pull a Roshi out and stick another Roshi in. It's more the role that's important. But in our community, he was just one guy,
yeah,
one king of the mountain. Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit like Kurtz going upriver, and
It's really what it was like. It was really like that in certain ways. And sometimes I wondered, I was like, is this like a Colonel Kurtz situation? And it really was in a lot of ways. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hope, are you going to be sending out a summary of this with the list of the books? Because I missed the
I
name of.
absolutely will. Yes. Yeah. And Shozan and Ruth, I'll include you in I
Oh,
always
super.
send out the recording, and then I do kind of like cliff notes of the talk. Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's very thorough.
I'm a teacher by training, so
Yeah.
got to take some notes.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Shozan before we close for today? Going once.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm
Thank you
really happy.
so much.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
much.
Thank
And
you. It's really, really fun, really nice, really fun. Thank you. I'm honored to
all
have been
right.
included in this.
Yeah.
And
Bye-bye.
next time I'm in
Thank you so
Vienna,
much.
I'll send you an email.
Oh, super. Yeah. Anyone, any of you, yeah, send me an email.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Shozan.
Thank
That
you.
was really wonderful. Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Ciao.